Okay, I'd like to call the February 27th, 2025 meeting of the County of Oswego Industrial Development Agency to order. It's 1:04. And Mel Chesbro is stepping in as acting secretary today. Mel, could you do a roll call of the board members, please?
I'd be happy to for you. Nick Padielli.
Present.
Mary Ellen Chesbro, yes. Patrick Carroll.
Present.
Tricia Peter Clark.
Present.
Tim Stahl.
Absent. He's going to be late.
And Gary Standard. Present. All accounted for.
Mark Greco.
Mark Greco.
I'm also here.
Where?
He's under absent last.
Oh, because you were excused. I'm sorry. Mark Greco.
Okay, and Austin, could you go over the staff and
Sure.
that we have here?
Yeah, so in attendance today from staff and guests, myself, Austin Gillock, CEO of the agency. Kevin Lamontagne is joining us virtually, CFO of the agency. Nate Emmons is here, staff of operations, Oswego County. Kevin Caracoli, general counsel for the organization, and we also are joined by a guest, Ben Lockwood from Housing Visions. That is everybody.
Okay, thank you. And so item number 1 on the agenda is the minutes from our previous meeting. Would someone like to make a motion to put the minutes on? Mark, second.
One second.
Tricia. Any discussion or questions or comments on the minutes for the January meeting or February meeting? January. Too much snow. Okay, all those in favor of passing the minutes?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Meeting was in the Pal Times on February 13th. And we're moving to item number 3 is the financial report for January. We want to hand this over to Kevin Lamontagne.
Yeah, I can take that, Nick. Thank you. So you have the statements, as Nick said, through January. That's 6 months with our fiscal year beginning on August 1st. So it's half a year. So as we look at, say, the income statement, it's easy to do some mental math to multiply figures by 2 to get an idea of sort of an annualized run rate. On the balance sheet, I really don't have too many comments that we haven't covered already. We will be discussing a few more details when we give a few delinquent loan updates, as well as the pilot EDF report. So I think we'll come back to some details on those lines. If you go to the, 5th page in the packet is the profit and loss statement. Again, we're in 6 months, 1/2 of the way through the fiscal year. You can see at this point, our revenue is lower than we would prefer for the end of January, but ahead of last year, which is helping to push our profits up from last year as well. Where we look down to a good gauge is the net operating income line on the first page of the P&L, about 2/3 of the way down, where while we're running at a loss at net operating income, we have improved over last year with the additional revenue. We've been working, as we've discussed in the past, we have a pipeline of some projects that are at various stages of getting ready to close. So we've been working between Austin and I and Kevin and our bond counsel. We've been following up with various projects that are approved but not yet closed and pushing those like we do. We typically do that this time of year, just after the change of the calendar year. We don't have any straight lease transaction pilot deals closing before the end of the month, before the end of February. We often do, because of the March 1st taxable status date is a deadline that's often important to begin the pilot benefits. But we have some others that are nearing being ready to close, or very close in one case. So we will have some other projects closing before the end of the fiscal year. And then on the P&L, I don't think I really have any other comments at this point. As we've previously reported, the January pilots, the couple of pilots that we have in January are taken care of. Everything's been dispersed. We've taken in some income from the 10% of the county share that's helping to capitalize the pilot EDF fund. So that's all I have.
Can you speak to
Any questions?
At -47?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
The property maintenance, can you speak to that? 4.7 on the expense report, the P&L.
Yep. Moment. Yes, so there was in in the process of kind of doing some routine, but not all the time, cleanup in our accounts. We found an entry that actually had survived one or two audits that was really something that should have been taken care of previously. It was a credit, basically an additional invoice for our property maintenance contractor, our primary one. And so we credited that out, discussed with the auditor, and then credited that out, but we took it this year so that we weren't adjusting any prior years. It was about $900. So even if you would put that back in, we're still running favorable to last year. Last year, in the fall, I think it was, we had a fair amount of cost due to like marking property lines and different things that hasn't recurred this year, especially I think with the new property, but also the sewage treatment plant in Volney and some other things. So we had some, it was a little unusually high in the beginning of last fiscal year, also property maintenance.
Primarily related to that new property that was purchased and.
Yeah,
And
also,
close to
yeah.
185 acres was
I think we did them all last year, reposting, if I recall correctly. Yeah, that's a good question.
Comments? All right. But we're on track, right, Kevin?
Yeah, I would say that only that, I would feel more confident had we had a couple of a project or two closed before the end of February deadline, but we continue to chase those. But I think on the cost side and other areas, we're doing okay. We're right where we should be.
Several of them are solar projects that have been
Yes.
Approvals and there's some.
So it's like earned income that we're not able to take yet. So
Okay,
until paid.
I get a motion on the financial report. Mark and Pat. Any more questions, comments, concerns? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Kevin.
Sure.
Fast New York grant application for the industrial park expansion update.
Turn this over to Nate to give this.
So I'm happy to announce that we actually have submitted our application. So that was submitted last week. And so it is off for the record for the approved amount. About $7.2 million is the ask. So we're happy. We're excited. We're kind of on to the next phase of kind of wait and see. And Austin's reaching out to folks within the state system just to kind of get a sense of kind of where we're at in the process as the application kind of moves forward. So we anticipate questions. Some of the questions on the application were interesting, and so we anticipate questions back. I think if I understand the process correctly, for every single application there will be a site visit by ESD before any approvals takes place. So we do anticipate that at least happening prior to any approvals.
And I can add a little bit. So just last week, the state announced a new round of projects being funded through Fast New York, and they do this probably about 4 times a year. So if they just did that last week, I'm assuming we're probably looking at about 3 or 4 months until we know for sure. Obviously, we may have some better understanding just, in terms of internal communications with them and where things are. But, we're looking probably at about any formal announcement related to it will probably be 3 to 4 months out on that. So already had good conversations with several people at the state that have sort of been pushing for this and so I won't share any names or anything like that, but there's been people that are very involved in the Fast New York program, as well as people involved regionally and that are supportive of and understand that this is a high priority for both the Oswego County IDA, but also for the region as well. That site is extremely important to future development. So everything's good there on that. And as Nate said before, I mean, it was a long time coming to get in. It's probably the most comprehensive grant application I've ever seen in terms of the amount of information that you're supposed to put in. But what we submitted for was a site that is shovel ready to build, and so you need to provide a ton of information to them that you are ready to build, that all the things have been done, and so there's a lot of engineering reports and other things like that really have to be done, or else they kind of look at you and say, well, you're not ready yet. You need to actually go back and do those things. So I think we feel we're in a pretty confident position of things that we've done to date, and all the information we provided and sort of the need and the opportunity. And so now we're, over the next couple months, Nate and I will be answering questions and scheduling and getting them to come out. Hopefully when the weather's a little bit better, they're not gonna be going out there anytime soon. So it's probably good that we waited till now.
Yeah. I think the other piece too is that, we've been chomping at the bit to kind of get this application in.
Mhm.
But there have been some other things that have happened where we felt like we were behind in some respects in getting this in, but there's information that we have received, especially over the fall, that made our application even stronger. So we could have submitted, last July, but given some other things that happened, actually our application, I feel strengthened
Yeah.
over the fall with some other bits of information. So I think we have a very strong application. Whether means funding, we'll see, but we literally checked all the boxes when it came to the application. There's nothing that we were not confident in. So
That's great. And as far as moving forward with this project for the expansion, do we need that in order for it to happen? Or do we
So-
keep moving forward at pace until we find out?
Yeah, I think that, we're in a place that, we still need to do some additional final design related things that need to be done regardless of that funding coming through or not. So it's not, we aren't stopping, it's just more we're doing things on a parallel path.
Okay.
So regardless of what happens, it's gonna need investments and improvements needed
Mhm.
that aren't gonna change based on your design. So
Okay.
so those things are gonna be moving forward. There were a couple things that just because of the weather, the engineering firm, it's taken them a little bit longer than they thought that it would take. So, but everything's still going according to our schedule that we have with EDA and just our own internal schedule.
Yep.
Great. Thank you. That's just an update, so there's nothing to vote on at that. EDC conference February 11th. Overview.
Yeah, so earlier this month, a couple weeks ago, actually, I went to the New York State Economic Development Council's annual conference. Took place in Albany, 2-day event. It is really where all of the economic development professionals across New York State go to participate, network related to best practices as well as some of the challenges of the day. There's also they invite site selector professionals to that event as well. So there were individuals there from GSLI, which is a very large site selection firm that's out of South Carolina that were there. They were presenting, but then they're also there to network and kind of talk to people, talk shop about properties and what your areas have. So some good connections were made at that. One of the major areas, and this isn't a surprise to us, but one of the major discussion areas at this conference, multiple seminars and discussions were about power. One, do we have enough power for our future needs? Do we have the transmission in place to get power where it needs to be? There was a lot of discussion about even if you have power, it takes so long to get transmission to where it needs to be from a regulatory perspective, as well as just timing on getting large substations and all that kind of thing. You could be 3-4 years out, even if everything else lines up. So it just showed how much more important it is to do shovel ready, to get sites shovel ready. Because if you wait till the project comes and then try to get the site start shovel ready, it's not going to work. That doesn't meet the schedule for business. So that was important. There was some conversations related to support for new energy production in New York State, which Oswego County is well positioned to be able to support those. Wasn't much in terms of the details on those things, but just hey, we're going to need a lot more power in the coming years, and that county up to the north of Syracuse is pretty good at making that stuff, and so I think that from that perspective as well, the things that are our natural competitive advantages were highlighted as part of these discussions. So I won't get more into it than that, but I think it was a great event to go to. I will also be attending the event in May in Cooperstown. That's their other event that they do with New York State EDC. and, you know, just continuing some of these topics. The other thing I will say is that the Empire State Development, they've stood up over the last year a team called Go Semi, which is their semiconductor strategy team. And they had several of their representatives there. I have made great introductions and connections with those people in those teams, actually people that are there that I've known for decades, you know, just happen to be in those positions now, which is helpful. So I think it was a great thing to go to, and I think there's already been some you know, momentum behind the scenes in terms of things that have come out of that. So
Great.
Yep.
Anybody got any questions or?
Is this the one that you mentioned? There was also a workshop on wetlands?
There was a workshop on wetlands, and unfortunately, they had 3 workshops going on at the same time, and they were all very good ones. And so I didn't go to the one on the wetlands for that. I've had my fill on wetlands.
Yeah, I understand.
You know, so I was actually going to one talking more about the new programs that Empire State Development is rolling out this year and sort of their priorities in that. So actually, one of those things that came out of it is that Fast New York is being expanded, and they've identified and understand that power is such a huge part of it. They're creating a program that's sort of an offshoot of Fast New York called Power Up, which is really about electrical infrastructure funding to solve some of those things. So it doesn't necessarily solve the timing, but you know, if you can get funding into projects, you know, best time to start a project would have been, you know, 5 years ago. Second best time is today. So, you know, if you can get the funding, you can at least get it started today and get those things going. So that's another part of that. I don't think if there's anything else. I think that's, you know, we can discuss more if you have any other questions. One last thing I do want to say, so Christy Eck, who's with SUNY Oswego, also attended. She made some great connections as well on the workforce side and some of the other things. So it's not just strictly economic development professionals. There's it's also useful for people for workforce development and education, especially in the partners and players that are going to be associated around large projects in the Central New York region.
Great. Thanks. Yep, for going. Anything else on that topic? Okay, number 6, 2025 project activity bond allocation.
Yeah, so every year, and this is based on every county in New York State and has a private activity bond allocation. So what this means is that for the population size of Oswego County, we are allocated to use if we have eligible projects, 5,120,353 to do tax exempt bond financing. So this is our tax exempt bond financing cap for projects through the IDA. This isn't related to civic facility and not-for-profit tax exempt bond financing. This is specifically to small issue tax exempt bond financing for manufacturing projects or housing projects. Those are typically the ones that are eligible for this type of funding. So this
hospital or someone else would be going.
That would be through like Civic Facility Corporation. Yeah, this is specifically for private for-profit industry. So this is our allocation for 2025 based on our population. If say we had a project that exceeded that, we could go to the state and ask them for an additional allocation above and beyond what our allocation by population is. But so the other thing that comes along with this is, so we have allocated for this year this $5.12 million for eligible projects if they come around. But if we don't use this by say like October, November in the year, we also get a request to give it back. And if you don't use it, you don't use it. You can't keep banking it and kind of building it up year to year. But you know, so really over the last decade plus, there has not been projects that have really fit the criteria. Also, until more recently, the interest rates were so low that tax exempt bond financing didn't make sense for the kind of fees that are associated. So we are in a financial climate right now where for large projects, there is significant savings. And I know Tricia, you could probably say that,
Yeah, absolutely.
you know, that you know, helped the Connect Care project through the Civic Facility Corporation. You know, but really from about 2009 until about 2022, interest rates were so low that the amount of savings that was there you couldn't justify doing it, you know, and especially when your bond allocation is only 5.12 million, couldn't do a large enough project to to make that make sense. So, I think there may be some projects this year that we have already had a couple initial conversations. Does this make sense? You know, manufacturing or housing or things like that. Could this be something that could be part of that potentially? Typically, it's been over the last decade plus is we don't use it and it goes back into the general pool and, you know, and I'll say that that's actually majority of IDAs across the state, that's what they're seeing, unless you're like, maybe like an IDA in Long Island, or you're an IDA in one of these other places that's seeing different kinds of growth. They're not really being utilized in rural areas. It's just, it's a sort of a very specific program that meets a very specific kind of project, and you know, the stars have not aligned recently, but there could be one this year that could be for this funding.
We don't need to vote on this at all.
This is just notifying, yep, just notifying you of that. What I would do going forward, though, if we get to a point in the year where the state is asking us to send it back, I will ask for board authority to do that.
I mean, this is an allocation. They haven't actually given.
There's no check. No, there's no big check. There's no little check. It's just, you have this as an allocation if you wanted to do a project. So the state just takes a look at based on population, and they have, I think it's $850 million statewide. You know, and some of that's related to the county, some of it's related to just their own bucket of funding at the state level. Say, based on your population, you are eligible to receive this allocation if you have a project that fits it. But it's not funding, it's not money in the bank, you know. Just allows us to issue tax exempt debt if something is eligible.
Okay, sounds good. Any questions on that topic? All right, looks like at this point, we need to move into executive session. Kevin, could you apply for the?
Yep, to review the financial condition of a particular person or corporation. Also, I believe there will be an update on pending litigation. Both of those pursuant to Public Officers Law, Section 105.
Motion by Mark, second by Mel. All those in favor? Any opposed?